Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the 7th race of the 2019 Manufacturer Series pre-season, which was held at the Willow Springs International Raceway, Big Willow Circuit. This is a race in the Group 4 category, with my vehicle being the BMW M4. With that, let's get racing. So, taking a look at the grid, you'll see that I've qualified 4th. In terms of the qualifying session, it was absolutely fantastic. A clean session from everybody in the C driver rating lobby, and the lap times were incredibly tight. First and second were well to their own, and well done to Norwegian for 117.9, well ahead of the rest of the field. But from third all the way down to 12th, it was only hundredths or tenths of a second separating us all, with myself being beaten to third place by the Audi there, their 118.9, and my 119.03 just pipping the Lamborghini behind to fourth, them having a 119.06. In terms of strategy for this 13 lap race, I wanted to do a longer first stint of 7 laps and a shorter second stint of 6 laps, all being done on the harder of the two tyre compounds, the racing hard tyre, the other compound being the racing medium, which I found was fantastic for qualifying but less so for race distance. And the reason I wanted to do a longer first stint was because tyre wear, particularly on the front left, was an issue on this track, where there being a good number of extended right hand turns at medium to high speed, i.e. turns 2, 6, 8 and 9, the front left tyre was going to be abused severely, and that meant I really had to manage that tyre wear, and I wanted to get the harder part of the tyre wear out of the way in the first stint so I could have an easier second stint where I could use the car to its greater potential. Because when we come on to fuel, I waited to do the whole race on a single tank of fuel with a little bit of fuel saving through the tighter section in section 2 of the track, so turns 3 through to 6, and I'll talk about that as we go. And by managing the fuel there, I'll be able to get to the end and have quite a bit of fuel remaining, so I could run the car at maximum fuel setting in terms of power if I wanted to be aggressive and try to pick up a place towards the end of the race, or the car being lighter with less fuel in it and the tyres being more available to me, or them being on a shorter stint for that second stint. Now out comes the end of the grid here, 20th place being brought up by an Aston Martin V8 Vantage, and we'll be getting underway with a racing start. Now my opening strategy over the first lap was to try and maintain the gap between myself and the guy in front, so third place the Audi, tried to keep it within say a second and a half, use their slipstream to pull me away from the Lamborghini behind in 5th, because that Lamborghini would be fast in a straight line, while the speed of this track on average being higher than other tracks I've driven the M4 around in previous races in this series. As we go, you see I immediately pull over to the right behind the Audi, and Lamborghini's doing the same, keeping a right hand line here. And I actually go for a defensive line going into turn 1. I actually go through in 3rd gear rather than 4th gear, which would be my standard. So I wait to block off that inside line and just take it carefully through the corner, so that way I could get a fantastic drive out and come straight up behind the Audi, who went a bit deep into the corner and almost put it off the track by the looks of things, as we now go into turn 2 and the race really gets underway. And we can see that the gap between myself and the Audis are consistent 0.5 seconds, whereas behind at the moment it looks as though those guys are squabbling a little bit for 5th, 6th and 7th, and as we go into the second section of the track I can start to pull away from the guys behind, and you can see that I've dropped down into fuel setting 2 as per what we said earlier. But before we can talk about that, I'm about to make a little mistake coming down into turn 5, and this is because I was carrying a bit more speed than I was used to running the slipstream of the Audi here, which means I get on the power at my standard point, I go a bit deep out of the corner, run onto the sand here, not costing me too much time but costing me the ability to stay in the slipstream of the Audi in front definitely, now falling back to about 2.5 seconds, and it means the guys behind with an Alfa Romeo now in 5th place are coming surging up behind as we go into turn number 8. But fortunately 8 was a corner where you had to take an inside tight line to go into 9 with a lot of speed, so it meant I could really be on the defensive here and not have to worry about that Alfa Romeo trying to carve up the inside or come around on the outside, and that's caused them to fall back into the clutches of 6th and 7th place, and the fight will commence there. And whilst they are getting a distant tow from the rear of my car at the moment, or the distant slipstream effect, it wasn't too much to worry about. And we can see the guys in front are not pulling away too quickly because they're all squabbling for places, where second and third really fighting one another by the Porsche and the Audi at the moment. And that means that I'm gradually pulling back up towards the rear of those cars, and in return, whilst the guys behind still aren't over a second away from me, that distance is going to grow very shortly, and it's already up to 1.1 seconds now as we're coming through the second half of turn 2. So as now we go up into the hill for turns 3, 4, 5 and 6, let's talk about the fuel saving. So here I'm not going down into fuel saving mode, I am not going down into fuel setting 2 because I want to pull the distance from the guys behind, but on the next lap I definitely will be. Because what I found with this section in particular was, it was all about how well you positioned your car, and in terms of whether you decided to lift to go around turn 4, or alternatively you went for a little squeeze of the brake, especially coming out of turn 4 and down into 5, and then just carried the momentum of the car through, letting the car roll the body across the corners using the full width of the track in order to get maximum speed. And that meant that going down into fuel setting 2 didn't really cost you any power through that section, but it mattered coming out of turn 6 into 7 and then as we go through 8 into 9. And that meant that because I was doing little bits of fuel saving, and fuel wasn't too much of a punishing factor, I could choose when I wanted to run laps on maximum power and when I wanted to run laps to do a bit of fuel saving. And if I got close behind the guys in front, I'd be dropping down into fuel setting 2 anyway, because their slipstream would give me the speed that I'd lose from not having my car at fuel setting 1. So it all worked out, I had it all calculated in my head. I was very confident that I didn't have to worry too much about fuel here. As for tyre wear right now, looking in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, what you'll see is that already that front left tyre is taking considerable wear compared to the rest of the tyres. The front right is also showing some wear, and the rear left as well is showing similar wear to the front right, but not as much as the front left. As we come through this second section again, and now gone down to fuel setting 2, an example of the fuel saving in effect. And we can see that the gap between myself and third and second hasn't really opened up at this point. It's actually come down to 2 seconds, and that's where these guys have been fighting considerably. It looks as though the Porsche's got completely in front of the Audi now, and the Porsche will start to pull away a little bit, perhaps close up to the Alfa Romeo in first place, and the Audi's going to fall back a little bit. But in this first stint, it looks as though all of us are trying to play it sensibly and trying to do an extended longer stint. Nobody's really pulling away from anyone at this point. We can see all 3 cars ahead in our screenshot right now, which would indicate they're trying to manage their race pace and probably go for a 7-lap stint in stint number 1 like myself. Now, one issue I did have, and some of you have probably noticed it already if you've raced around this track on this game or alternatively other games where it's available, is that I'm not comfortable with section 3. I'm really having difficulty in maintaining a lot of power through turn 9 in particular. Now, this is something I really wanted to work on over the course of my practice sessions, because my qualifying reference lap was a 1:18.6, whereas my qualifying lap here was a 1:19.0. I was losing approximately 4 to 5 tenths a lap because I'd started to back out and do little bits of braking going into turn 9. And the reason for that was I couldn't get a consistent line coming out of turn 9 that didn't run the risk of me sending the car either flying off of the inner curb of the corner, alternatively me putting a wheel on the outside of the track, so putting a wheel on the sand, getting on the power and sending the car shooting off into the pits by accident, or just spinning out completely. So what I did, I decided, right, I'm not going to be the fastest guy in this race, but I will try to be one of the most consistent drivers in this race. And bar the mistake we made on the first lap, carrying a bit too much speed out of turn 5, as we already discussed, this has been a consistent race so far, and hopefully that'll work in our favour in terms of either us being able to maintain 4th place, which it seems to be at the moment. What if 5th, 6th and 7th all been fighting for 5th place, and the guys in front haven't made any mistakes so far, but you never know what could happen over the full race distance. We're only on lap 4 coming into lap 5 right now, as I gradually lift through turn 9 here, which helps to save a bit of fuel as well. This was working out in my favour as I hit a bollard there. Well, not a bollard as such, one of the braking boards which seems to have come loose at the end of turn 9. Somebody's gone off the track at that point and sent one of the braking boards flying onto the circuit, and rather than panic I just lifted off the throttle completely. It has cost me some time to the guys in front, now 3.3 seconds from 3rd place, and it means that 5th place has started to catch up to me because I've lost some speed, but it's something that happens. We reacted to it, we dealt with it, and now we can push on. And I practiced this a lot, and another thing that you're going to see later on in this race, and hopefully we'll come back to it if I remember, is that some of the braking boards here were taken out over the course of the race. I would expect it to happen because the braking boards are close to the outside of the track, and if somebody gets it wrong, they're going to take perhaps 1 or 2 out in a single pass. And that meant that what I did for a couple of laps in my practice, I actually went around the track, took out all the braking boards, and then did 5 or 6 laps where I did the track entirely through memory in terms of braking points. I had no boards to guide me. As we come to the next lap, I'll tell you where I intend to brake, and then you're going to see on the laps where the braking boards have started to disappear that I'm roughly braking or lifting in the same positions, and that's because that memory's really settled in and I can remember the track for the position of the track, not just the boards, which are a visual indicator of where I should be braking, lifting, etc. Now we are coming towards the latter portion of this first stint, and just coming through here into turn 9 once again, we can see that our fuel management has worked out really well. We've got 8.4 laps remaining, and that front left tyre is really starting to show wear as we come on to lap number 6. Let me give you a quick lap guide in terms of braking points and that. So coming up to turn number 1, I'm going to be braking at the 100 board here, down into 4th gear, going through this left-hander, keeping it tight to the inside of the corner and letting the car roll out to the outside. And then as we come through here into turn 2, I'm going to be lifting off just as we go past the tyres or the board that was up on the right side, the green board on the hill. And as we come through, we can see that 3rd place has actually gone off the track. It looks like it was 1st place who's gone off the track, not 3rd place, my apologies, and that's brought us up into 3rd. Braking at the 100 board here, or just after it, going down to 3rd gear to go into turn 3, and then up into turn number 4. And what you'll see, I'll just lift as we see the disappearance of the curb there, and perhaps it was a case that the Porsche and the Alfa Romeo had an accident, because the Porsche was rendered out there as they now dropped into 2nd and the Audi's charging off. Braking just after the curb disappears there in the corner leading up into turn 5, and now getting on the power as we let the car roll outside to going into turn 6 here, letting the car just roll through the corner. And I'm getting quite close to the back of the Porsche, the slipstream, but what I thought was they're going to go defensive on the inside, there they go, and I'd have to take them on the outside of turn 8 going into 9, and because of my discomfort with turn 9 in particular, I thought, you know what, I'm going to back out of this, just riding their slipstream helps save me a little bit of fuel, as I lift off and do a very short brake, come past the 200 board, and now just lifting the car off and starting to get on the power as we pass the sunsets there in terms of a visual indicator, the sun laying on the track, getting on the power, coming out of turn 9 to complete the lap. So all that was stored in my brains, that way I could do this without the need of the visual board indicators through the practice I'd done. Braking a little bit later there rather than the 100 board this time. I wanted to see if I could really keep close to this Porsche, put some pressure on them, perhaps they'd make another mistake, and also note that I'm using fuel setting 2 at this point, not fuel setting 1, so it's helping me save even more fuel because I'm using their slipstream to my advantage. But as we're going through turn 2 here, you can see that the Porsche's got a bit more grip than myself, they've kept a better line, they've got a lot more speed coming out the corner, so I've fallen out of the slipstream. I'm going to stay in fuel setting 2 here to do a little bit more fuel saving. And the reason why this tight section was so good for fuel saving was because it wasn't really about getting on the power quickly coming through turns 3, 4, 5 and 6. It was about the position of your car and using your car's momentum to get the most out of the corners, which is why you'll see a whole variety of lines going through these corners. Some people will focus on that power coming out of turn 5 in particular, whereas I felt just let the car roll out and build up the throttle and get on the power going into turn 6. We have unfortunately fallen back from 2nd place a bit. They really are comfortable with sections 2 and 3 in particular, and section 3 more so because of my discomfort by comparison with their own comfort. But nothing to complain about. We're still maintaining a good pace. We've got 7.5 seconds between ourselves and 4th place as we're about to come into the pits, and those 7.5 seconds are going to be crucial if 4th place has already pitted. I can't remember if they have or not. So coming to the pits, put on that new set of racing hards, no fuel needed, we've got enough to make it to the end of the race. Jumping on another set of hard tyres, and congrats to the Porsche doing it on a set of mediums, that's phenomenal. They're really good at saving their tyres. As we come out the pits, we're going to see 4th place come charging up behind us, but it's not going to be enough for them to leapfrog us into 3rd place. Instead, we'll take a defensive line in 4th gear, coming out to turn 1, and now we're going to be running in power setting 1, i.e. fuel setting 1, just for this lap to make sure we can pull the distance from the guy behind. Remember, we're on the fresher tyres, and this actually works out in our favour. If we can run the car at maximum power for the first lap or so of this 2nd stint, then we're getting the most out of the car's potential performance compared to if we were trying to use fuel setting 1 for an entire lap when the tyres are really worn, so the final lap of the race, where would be more a higher chance of actually sending the car off the track because we'd be expecting grip to be there, which would go against the amount of power that we've actually got available. Now as we come through turn 5 and into turn 6 again, we can see that gap between us and 4th place has already dropped back to 2.6 seconds. Again, there is a bit of fighting going on between us and them. Sorry, not between us and them. There's a bit of fighting going on between them and their colleagues around them. And what that means is they're losing time on us throughout the course of the lap. And that's where we're able to get to safety as we're coming around to finish off lap number 8. Now coming through here, no boards seem to be knocked off yet from turn 9, which surprised me. Normally that's where the boards would disappear, or I'd expect them to disappear, but what of a lot of mistakes happening in qualifying where some drivers were pushing really hard. And we also saw that a little bit going through turn 1 as well. The boards on the right here were disappearing a bit where people were being really aggressive trying to get their qualifying laps in. But nonetheless, coming through turn 1 again, down to 4th gear. Looking at the laps remaining, we've got 5.3 remaining. We've got 2.4 seconds between us and the guy in 4th. 3.2 seconds between us and the Spaniard in 2nd in the Porsche. They're doing a really good job at managing the gap between us and them. And I get the feeling they've got a little bit more pace to unleash if they want to. And they're just keeping it at the bay at the moment, doing perhaps a little bit of fuel saving. We can see that our lap times on the right hand side of our screen are consistent. On that first stint in particular, we did have a fast lap of 1:19.6, but then 2 1:20s and then 2 1:21s. Our laps gradually getting slower and slower as tyre wear was becoming a factor on the front left in particular. That's where we're really losing the time, but still nothing major to complain about as we come out the corner here and we start to go into turn 6 once again for the 9th time. And following through at this point, we can see that first place is being caught up to by the Porsche in 2nd. Looks as though that Porsche is really pushing first place hard, and I get the feeling that first place is probably at their maximum performance in terms of how much race pace they've got, and they're working as hard as possible to maintain the lead. Where it'll work out or not, time will tell. We'll note that the 250 board has disappeared from turn 9 by the looks of things. Perhaps that's what we ran over earlier, and that wasn't really too much of an indicator there because we're using the 200 board, but nonetheless. As we come on to lap number 10 then, we've got a back mark here in 20th, and I must say, shout out to this chap in 20th, really good job of getting off of the racing line going through the corner. They really backed out of it and pulled off the circuit, and whilst they were phased out, if they were not phased out and they were a solid model, I would have gone past them without issue. I did back off a little bit just to make sure if they made any sudden moves into the centre of the corner, alternatively just back onto the racing line, I wasn't going to go charging into them and send them flying off the circuit and pick up a penalty and lose my race pace as well as a result of the incident. But everything came off cleanly there. It's something that's quite hard to do, except when people are coming through faster than yourself and backing off and getting off of the racing line. I'm guilty of it as much as anybody else. And as we come through turn 4 and down into turn 5 at this point, you can see that 1st and 2nd are still pushing one another hard, and then 1st place actually drops away. The Audi goes spinning off the track. And what I get the feeling may have happened there is that they put a wheel on the outside of turn 5 as they're coming out of it and going into the inside of turn 6. They got on the power too early, and that led to them just spinning off the track, going up into the hill. And that's cost them a good chunk of the race as they drop down into 6th and they're going for a recovery drive now. Whereas I'm still holding on to 2nd place. The Porsche in front, still 3.5 seconds away now up to 3.6 as we're losing time into this final section. And that's the way things are pretty much going to stay. Unfortunately, I've got to point that out. Nothing major is going to change now. And really it's a focus on getting to the end of the race, which is perhaps the hardest thing to do when concentration is going to be at a premium. Now I say that because the problem is when you're racing by yourself, pardon me, and you don't really have someone in front of you who you can aim to beat because they're just so much faster than you, and the guy behind it isn't putting any pressure on you, you get into this state of just thinking about, right, I've got to keep punching in solid lap times, and your mind starts to get into this lull of just, okay, brake here, turn here, do this, do that. And once you start to enter that lull, one tiny mistake can be amplified because you're not thinking at that point, you're just in a way programmed to do the track in a certain way and press your different controls at different times in a certain manner. So what I was trying to do is keep myself entertained by constantly, every time I'm on a straight, looking up at that timing on the top left corner of the screen to the guy in front, and at the timings to the guy in front. I thought to myself, right, if I can keep those timings consistent, then I'll be really happy. If I can get them to contract, i.e. to the guy in front, and expand to the guy behind, I'll be even happier. So that was a way of playing a little mini game in my head to keep my concentration up. And we can see now coming through turn 9 that all the braking boards are really starting to disappear. There's only the 50 and the 100 left, but because of that practice I put in of getting used to a world without braking boards in turn 9 and all the other turns where they're present, that meant that wasn't an issue for me. I could just do it through the feel of the car going into the corner and that memory experience as we come on to lap 12 now. And we can see we've got 2.3 laps remaining, so at this point I'm not concerned about having to do any more fuel saving. So I decide, I believe, for the rest of this race to run the car in the maximum fuel configuration, i.e. fuel map setting 1. That way we're getting the maximum amount of power going through the car, and we can really try to hunt down first place if they start to make mistakes, or they've got to back out of it because they haven't saved as much fuel to get to the end as perhaps they anticipated. Behind, the story's still the same, 5.3 seconds between myself and 3rd place. Nothing's really happening there, and it looks as though 3rd is cemented now. The fight for the positions behind me is really concluded, albeit 4th and 5th seem to be quite close to one another, looking at the mini-map in the top right corner of the screen. And then you've got 6th and 7th pursuing, and there's quite a gap back to 8th, 9th, so on. Or the Audi, who was originally leading this race, or at least ahead of me, have dropped back to 8th, and now it would seem fighting to hold on to 8th to the end of the race. Carrying through then to the final section of the circuit to complete lap number 12. The gap between myself and first has really opened up now. The gap between myself and second is still in a consistent region, just over 5 seconds, 5.5, 5.4. Just easing our way through the final corner to start our final lap. Bringing the car around, we can see in terms of tyre wear, looking back at the bottom left hand corner of our screen, that the front left is starting to show signs of considerable wear. And that's something I have to consider now that we're going to be pushing the car a little bit hard in order to bring it home, just in case the Porsche in front does make a mistake or alternatively starts running out of fuel. I don't think it's going to happen, although you will see the gap between myself and them contract considerably over the course of this lap. I think it was more of a case of them thinking, you know what, it's the final lap, take it easy, just bring the car home. And they also do come up against the back marker. Perhaps the back marker's not as obliging as the previous back marker we encounter. I'm not sure exactly what was going through the head of the Porsche, but they know one thing: they drove an absolutely solid race, and congratulations to them because they deserve the first place. And as we come through here, turn 4 for the final time down into 5, you can see I'm getting a little bit wobbly with the car. I'm pushing the car really hard to try and hunt down first place right in case they do make that mistake or they are running out of fuel. I want to get as close as possible. And we can see that the gap's dropped down to 2.5 seconds, but it's holding, gradually decreasing to 2.4 seconds. But it's not going to be enough to get first. I wasn't expecting to get first, but by comparison with the previous result at the Nürburgring in the M3 GT, this is an absolutely fantastic result to come home in second on a track where I wasn't 100% comfortable, particularly with this final section, as we come through turn 9 now to wrap it up and bring the BMW M4 home in a good second place. I'm not going to lie when I say I was quite proud of this result. Whilst I definitely wasn't one of the fastest drivers on the circuit, I was perhaps one of the more consistent. And by combining this consistency with my safety first approach in dealing with the uncomfortable final section of the circuit, from my own perspective, I was able to bring my car home in a solid position. And that means I feel geared up now for race 8 at Suzuka coming this Saturday when we switch back to the Group 3 category. With that, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I have been TX141, and until next time, take care.